The warehouse was burning from the inside out. Smoke rolled through shattered windows like ink spilling into water, thick and black and endless. Flames roared somewhere deep within the structure, hidden behind walls of corrugated metal that groaned under the heat. The air tasted of ash and chemicals, bitter on the tongue, sharp in the lungs. Captain Hayes stood at the edge of the scene, radio pressed to his ear, his face carved from stone. Around him, firefighters moved with practiced urgency. Hoses uncoiled, equipment clanged, voices shouted coordinates through the chaos, but something felt wrong. The building shouldn't have been occupied. It was supposed to be empty, condemned, scheduled for demolition next month, and yet someone had called it in. Someone had seen movement inside. Hayes dropped the radio. His jaw tightened. He turned to his crew, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "We go in. 2 teams. East and west entry points. Stay low, stay fast." Beside him, a German shepherd named Riker sat perfectly still, ears forward, eyes locked on the warehouse. The dog didn't bark, didn't whine, but his body was coiled, tense, like a spring wound too tight. Hayes glanced down. "What is it, boy?" Riker's gaze didn't waver. He was staring at something no one else could see. But what he uncovered wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Station 19 sat on the edge of the city, where industrial sprawl met residential neighborhoods, in a patchwork of old brick and faded paint. It was a working-class district, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where corner stores still extended credit, where kids played stickball in the street until the streetlights came on. The firehouse itself was a relic. 2 stories of red brick with brass poles that gleamed under fluorescent light. A row of bay doors that opened onto a narrow street lined with parked cars and chain-link fences. Inside, the air smelled of diesel fuel, coffee, and the faint metallic tang of equipment cleaned 1,000 times over. The apparatus bay stretched wide and deep, home to Engine 19 and Ladder 19, both vehicles maintained with obsessive care by Tommy Green, the engineer who treated them like living things. The walls were covered with decades of history, photos of crews past and present, commendations in dusty frames, a memorial board listing the names of firefighters who'd made the ultimate sacrifice. Upstairs, the living quarters felt lived in and comfortable. A kitchen with mismatched chairs around a scarred wooden table. A common room with a television that only got half the channels and a couch that sagged in the middle. Individual bunk rooms, each one personalized with photos, books, and the small comforts that made 24-hour shifts bearable. Captain Jonas Hayes had been stationed here for 12 years. He knew every inch of this place, the way the floor creaked near the lockers, the temperamental espresso machine that only worked if you hit it just right, the shower in the back bathroom that always ran cold for the first 30 seconds. He knew which steps on the staircase groaned, which windows stuck in summer, which radiators clanged and hissed in winter. But more than the building, he knew his team. There was Marco Delgado, 26 years old, fresh out of the academy but already showing the makings of a great firefighter. He had quick hands, a quicker mind, and the kind of enthusiasm that reminded Hayes why he'd joined the department in the first place. Marco was always first to volunteer for the worst jobs, crawling into tight spaces, climbing to precarious heights, staying late to clean equipment. He came from a family of firefighters. His father, his uncle, his grandfather all wore the badge. It was in his blood. There was Jenna Liu, the paramedic who'd seen everything in her 15 years on the job. She had a voice like gravel from too many years breathing smoke, and a bedside manner that could calm a panicking mother or ease a dying man with equal grace. She was small, barely 5'3", but she could lift a grown man onto a stretcher without breaking a sweat. Her locker was covered with thank you cards from patients she'd saved, families she'd helped, lives she'd touched. There was Tommy Green, the engineer with hands like sledgehammers and a heart bigger than the engine he maintained. He'd been at Station 19 for 20 years, longer than anyone else. He knew every bolt, every valve, every quirk of the equipment. His laugh echoed through the firehouse like rolling thunder, and his cooking, while often questionable, was made with genuine love. He had 3 kids, all grown now, and photos of 7 grandchildren taped inside his locker door. And then there was Ethan Calloway. Ethan had joined the crew 3 years ago, transferring in from Station 42 across the county. The official reason was to be closer to his aging parents who lived in the district. The unofficial reason, the one nobody talked about, was that he'd wanted a fresh start after a messy divorce that had left him broke and broken. He was 34, quiet, methodical, The kind of guy who kept his locker organized and his reports filed on time. He didn't joke around much during downtime, didn't join the crew for beers at Murphy's pub after shift, didn't share much about his personal life, but he was good at his job, solid, dependable, the kind of firefighter you wanted watching your back in a burning building. Hayes had never had a reason to doubt him, until now. It started small. Whispers, really. Rumors that drifted through the station like smoke, impossible to pin down but impossible to ignore. A grant that didn't arrive when it was supposed to. Relief funds meant for community programs, fire safety education, youth outreach, emergency supply distribution. Delayed, then redirected, then lost. The programs had been good, really good. Fire safety classes at the elementary school, teaching kids how to check smoke detectors, practice stop, drop and roll, recognize the sound of a carbon monoxide alarm. Youth outreach at the community center, giving teenagers a place to go after school, teaching CPR and first aid, showing them career paths they might never have considered. Emergency supply distribution for families in need, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, escape ladders for second-story bedrooms. Simple things, cheap things, things that saved lives. All of it funded by the City Relief Fund initiative, a federal grant distributed through a local non-profit. $200,000 allocated over 3 years, meant to serve a community that desperately needed it. The first year had been incredible. They'd installed smoke detectors in over 300 homes, taught fire safety to more than 1,000 kids, distributed emergency supplies to families who couldn't afford them. The impact was measurable, tangible, real. Then the second year came and the money didn't. At first it was just delays. The city said the funds were processing. The non-profit said they were waiting on paperwork. Everything would be sorted out soon. Just be patient. Hayes had been patient. For weeks, then months. But the programs had to shut down. The classes stopped. The community center closed its doors to the youth outreach. Families went without the equipment they needed. And people noticed. Maria Santos, a single mother of 3 who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, had specifically enrolled her daughter in the fire safety classes. She'd been counting on them. When they stopped, she called the firehouse, confused and concerned. Hayes had to tell her he didn't know when or if they'd resume. Mr. Chen, who ran the bodega on the corner, had received a free smoke detector the year before. It had saved his life when a faulty wire started a fire in his stockroom at 2 in the morning. He'd wanted to donate money to the program to help other families. Hayes had to tell him there was no program to donate to anymore. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was a community that had been promised help and then abandoned. Hayes had filed reports, made calls, pushed back against bureaucratic runarounds and vague reassurances. He'd spent hours on hold with city officials, days waiting for callbacks that never came, weeks chasing paper trails that led nowhere. The city said the funds had been dispersed to the non-profit. The non-profit said they'd transferred the money to the designated accounts, but somewhere between point A and point B, $200,000 had simply vanished. Every lead turned cold, every contact went silent, every attempt to trace the money hit a dead end. Hayes had been ready to give up, to accept that this was just how things worked sometimes. Corruption and incompetence wrapped in red tape, impossible to untangle, impossible to fight. Then, 2 weeks ago, Riker found something. Riker wasn't just any dog. He was a certified search and rescue animal, trained to locate survivors in collapsed buildings, dense forests, flood zones. He could detect the faintest trace of human scent beneath rubble, through water, across miles of wilderness. His nose was a tool more precise than any machine. His instincts honed through years of drills and real-world operations. Hayes had raised Riker from a pup, 8 weeks old when he arrived at the firehouse, all oversized paws and floppy ears, tumbling around like a furry tornado. The crew had fallen in love with him instantly. Marco taught him to fetch tennis balls in the parking lot. Jenna snuck him scraps from her lunch, grilled chicken, bits of cheese, the occasional French fry when she thought no one was looking. Tommy built him a custom bed near the apparatus bay, padded with old turnout gear that still smelled like smoke and sweat. But it was Hayes who trained him, who woke at dawn to run drills in empty parking lots and abandoned buildings, who spent hours teaching him to differentiate scents, to follow trails through distractions, to stay calm when chaos erupted around him, who learned to read the subtle shifts in Riker's posture, the angle of his ears, the set of his shoulders, the tension in his tail, and understand what each one meant. They were partners. More than that, they were a team. Riker had saved 6 lives in his 4 years of service. A hiker lost in the woods after dark. 2 children trapped in a collapsed garage after a tornado. An elderly woman with dementia who'd wandered away from her care facility in winter. A construction worker buried under debris when scaffolding gave way. Each time, Riker had found them when human searchers had failed. His nose cut through the noise, the competing scents, the distractions, the false leads, and locked onto what mattered: human life, human need. And lately, Riker had been trying to tell Hayes something. It started during routine equipment checks. Hayes would be walking through the apparatus bay, clipboard in hand, counting oxygen tanks and inspecting hose lengths, and Riker would stop. Just stop. His ears would swivel toward the back corner, his body would go rigid, and he'd start sniffing. Slow, deliberate, methodical, the kind of sniffing that meant he'd found something. At first, Hayes thought nothing of it. Dogs got distracted. They picked up on smells humans couldn't detect. The residue of a burger someone had dropped 3 weeks ago, traces of motor oil from a leaking engine, the lingering scent of a raccoon that had wandered through the bay one night looking for garbage. But Riker kept returning to the same spot, day after day, shift after shift. A storage locker near the back wall, old, dented, secured with a padlock that had rusted over years of disuse. No one remembered what was inside. No one had opened it in ages. It was just there, part of the landscape, forgotten and ignored, except someone had opened it recently. Hayes noticed it one evening during a routine walkthrough. He was checking inventory before the shift change, making sure everything was where it should be when he passed the locker, and something caught his eye. The lock. It was new, shiny brass, unscratched, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The keyhole was modern, a stark contrast to the rusted metal of the locker itself. Hayes stopped, frowned, ran his thumb over the smooth surface. Beside him, Riker sat, staring at the locker with unblinking intensity. His body was perfectly still, but tension radiated from him like heat from pavement on a summer day. "What's in there, boy?" Riker's tail didn't wag. His eyes didn't leave the door. Hayes made a mental note to ask around. Find out who had access to this locker. Find out what was inside. Find out why someone had replaced a lock on a storage unit nobody used. But before he could follow up, before he could ask the questions gnawing at the back of his mind, the call came in. Structure fire, 4200 Industrial Way. Reports of smoke and possible occupants. All hands on deck. The warehouse. The same warehouse Hayes had photographed 3 days earlier after Riker had led him there on a walk through the neighborhood. The same warehouse that sat abandoned and condemned, scheduled for demolition, with no reason for anyone to be inside. And now it was burning. As Hayes climbed into the engine, as the sirens wailed and the city blurred past, as Riker settled into his compartment with alert, watchful eyes, Hayes felt the pieces of something larger beginning to shift into place. He just didn't know what picture they would form. Not yet. The call came in at 6:47 p.m., right in the middle of dinner. Tommy had made his famous, or infamous, depending on who you asked, firehouse chili. The kind that was more beans than meat, more heat than flavor, but filled your stomach and warmed you from the inside out. Marco was arguing with Jenna about the baseball playoffs. Tommy was doing his best to convince everyone that cilantro was an acceptable chili ingredient. Ethan sat at the end of the table, quiet as usual, pushing food around his plate without really eating. Hayes was halfway through his second bowl when the alarm blared, 3 sharp tones that cut through the conversation like a knife. Everyone froze. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of traffic outside. Then the dispatcher's voice crackled through the speakers, calm and clipped, delivering information that would change everything. Station 19, structure fire, 4200 Industrial Way. Reports of smoke and flames visible from street level. Possible occupants inside. Multiple calls received. Time out. 1847. The crew moved as one. Chairs scraped back. Bowls clattered into the sink. Boots hit the floor in a thunder of movement. Hayes was first down the pole, Riker right behind him, the dog's paws hitting the apparatus bay floor with practiced precision. Gear came off hooks. Turnout pants, suspenders, coats, helmets. 90 seconds from alarm to wheels rolling. Standard response time for Station 19. Hayes rode shotgun in Engine 19. Riker secured in his special compartment behind the cab, a custom-built space with padding, ventilation, and quick-release harnesses in case of emergency. Through the windshield, the city rushed past in a blur of streetlights and neon signs, pedestrians stopping to watch them pass, cars pulling to the side to let them through. Marco's voice crackled over the radio from ladder 19, following close behind. "Captain, isn't that the warehouse from the photo you showed us? The one you and Riker walked past the other day?" Hayes' jaw tightened. "Yeah, it is. Hell of a coincidence." "Yeah?" Tommy's voice cut in from the driver's seat. "Building's been condemned for weeks. Demolition permit filed. Why would anyone be inside?" "Maybe a squatter," Jenna suggested from the back. "Homeless person looking for shelter. Or urban explorers," Marco added. "Kids with cameras, looking for Instagram shots. Or something else," Hayes said quietly, more to himself than to the crew. Tommy glanced at him. "Something else?" Hayes didn't answer. His mind was racing, connecting dots he couldn't quite see yet. The missing relief funds, the new lock on the old storage locker, Riker's strange behavior, the warehouse sitting empty and forgotten, and now burning. They arrived to find the scene already chaotic. The warehouse was a 3-story industrial structure. Old brick and corrugated metal, windows blown out, flames punching through the roof in angry orange fists. Heat radiated in suffocating waves, distorting the air, turning the pavement beneath their boots into a shimmering mirage. Smoke billowed into the darkening sky, visible for miles, drawing crowds of onlookers who stood behind hastily erected police barricades, phones out, recording everything. Battalion Chief Rivera met them at the perimeter, her face grim. She was a veteran of 30 years, a woman who'd seen everything the job could throw at you and came back for more. If she looked worried, it was bad. 2 entry points, she said without preamble. East side and west side, structures unstable. Demolition was scheduled because of code violations. But we've got reports of someone inside. Could be a squatter, could be kids, could be nothing. But we can't risk it. Hayes nodded. How do you want to split it? 2 teams, fast sweep, in and out. I don't want anyone in there longer than necessary. If you don't find someone in 5 minutes, you abort and we let it burn. Understood. Hayes divided the crew. Marco and Tommy would take ladder 19 and hit the east entrance, a loading dock with a roll-up door. He and Ethan would take the west side, a smaller personnel entrance near what used to be the office section. Jenna would stay with the engine, coordinating communications and preparing for potential triage. If they found someone, she'd be ready. As they geared up, Hayes caught Ethan's eye. The younger firefighter looked pale, his movements stiff and mechanical. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the fact that they hadn't entered the building yet. "You good?" Hayes asked, adjusting his SCBA mask. Ethan nodded, but it was unconvincing. "Yeah, good. You don't look good." "I'm fine, Captain. Just haven't eaten much today. Low blood sugar, maybe." Hayes studied him for a moment. Something was off, but there wasn't time to dig into it now. "Stay close. Stay focused. We're in and out." "Roger that." They moved toward the west entrance, Riker on a short lead beside Hayes. The dog's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the relaxed, friendly companion. In his place was a working animal, focused and intense, every sense on high alert. As they approached the building, Riker started pulling hard on the lead, not in excitement, in urgency. His hackles rose along his spine. A low growl rumbled in his chest, barely audible under the roar of the fire. "Easy," Hayes murmured. "Easy, boy." But Riker didn't ease. If anything, he grew more agitated, his body coiled tight, his eyes locked on the building with laser focus. Hayes glanced at Ethan. "He's picking up something." Ethan didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the burning structure, his face unreadable behind his mask, but his hands were shaking as he adjusted his gloves. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat. Something was very wrong here, but there was no time to figure out what. The building was burning. Someone might be inside. They had a job to do. They pushed through the door. The interior was hell made manifest. Smoke choked every corridor, thick and toxic and black as oil, reducing visibility to arm's length at best. The heat was brutal, pressing down like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe even through the SCBA. Hayes moved by instinct, following the flow of air currents. The layout of similar buildings burned into his memory from decades of experience. The walls were corrugated metal, warped and buckling under the heat. The floor was concrete, cracked and uneven, scattered with debris, broken pallets, empty oil drums, the skeletal remains of old machinery. The ceiling was a maze of exposed beams and ductwork, pipes that dripped condensation and insulation that smoldered and sparked. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a trap. Riker stayed close, his nose working overtime, sorting through the overwhelming chaos of scents. Burning wood and plastic, melting tar, chemical accelerants, years of accumulated filth now releasing toxic fumes. But beneath it all, he was tracking something specific. They moved through a narrow hallway, flashlight beams cutting pale arcs through the smoke. The radio crackled with check-ins from Marco and Tommy on the east side. So far, nothing. No sign of occupants. No sign of anything but fire and destruction. Then Riker stopped. Not a gradual halt, not a cautious pause. He froze mid-step, his entire body going rigid, ears pinned back, nose twitching. Hayes knelt beside him, one hand on the dog's shoulder. "What have you got?" Riker's nose worked the air, parsing scents invisible and incomprehensible to human senses. Then he took a step forward, another, moving with deliberate precision toward a section of wall that looked no different from any other. Corrugated metal, streaked with soot, warped by heat. But Riker wasn't looking at the wall, he was looking through it. His body language screamed alert. Find discovery. Hayes ran his gloved hand along the surface, fingers brushing over rivets and seams. Then he felt it. A gap, narrow, almost imperceptible. But there, the panel wasn't welded in place like the others. It was bolted, and the bolts were new, shiny, recently installed. Hayes's pulse quickened. "Ethan, I need your Halligan." There was a pause, long enough to be noticeable. Static hissed through the radio. "Captain?" "Now, Ethan." Ethan appeared through the smoke, the pry bar in his hands. He stared at the wall, then at Hayes, and something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, fear, resignation, all of it hidden an instant later behind the impassive mask of a professional firefighter doing his job. "What are we doing?" His voice was tight, strained. "Opening it." "Captain, we don't have time for—" "Now." Ethan hesitated. For a long, terrible moment, Hayes thought he might refuse, thought he might turn and walk away, leaving Hayes alone with his suspicions and his loyal dog in a burning building. Then slowly, Ethan wedged the Halligan into the seam between the panel and the wall. He braced his feet, gripped the handle, and pried. The metal shrieked. Bolts popped free with sharp cracks. The panel gave way, swinging open like a door, revealing darkness beyond. Cool air rushed out, a stark contrast to the inferno surrounding them. Hayes stepped through, raising his flashlight, and stopped breathing. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 15. No windows, no fire, no smoke. Just a hidden space carved out of the warehouse, insulated somehow from the destruction consuming the building around it. And it was filled with boxes, cardboard boxes, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling in neat organized rows, each one marked with a logo Hayes recognized immediately. City Relief Fund Initiative. His stomach dropped. His mind raced. His hands trembled as he reached for the nearest box. He pulled back the cardboard flap. Inside, money. Stacks of it. Bundled bills wrapped in plastic, sorted by denomination, labeled with dates and amounts. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Maybe more. Hayes felt dizzy, felt sick, felt the world tilt sideways. This was it. The missing relief funds. The money meant for smoke detectors and fire safety classes and emergency supplies for families who couldn't afford them. The money that was supposed to help people, save lives. All of it, right here, hidden in a forgotten warehouse, stashed away like stolen treasure. He turned slowly, his movements mechanical, his thoughts screaming. Ethan stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the orange glow of the fire beyond. "Did you know about this?" Hayes's voice was barely a whisper. Ethan didn't answer. "Ethan," louder now, harder. Still nothing. "Answer the goddamn question. We need to get out of here." Ethan's voice was hollow, empty. "The building's coming down. We need to—" "You knew." It wasn't a question anymore. It was an accusation, a verdict. "You knew this was here." Ethan's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him all at once, like air escaping a punctured tire. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "I can't." "Tell me." The building groaned. Somewhere above them, a support beam cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Debris rained down. Time was running out. But Hayes didn't move. He stood there, staring at the man he'd trusted, waiting for an explanation that could make sense of the senseless. Ethan's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "They came to me 6 months ago. The contractors, the ones handling the relief fund distribution. They said there was a problem with the paperwork, a delay. They needed somewhere to store the funds temporarily while they sorted it out. Off the books, unofficial. And you believed them? They offered me money, $10,000 just to hold on to it for a few weeks. His voice broke. My parents, they're sick, both of them, medical bills. I was drowning in debt from the divorce. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when you're desperate. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. I was going to lose my house, lose everything. They said it was temporary, just a few weeks. No one would get hurt. But people did get hurt. Hayes' voice was ice. Kids who didn't learn fire safety. Families who didn't get smoke detectors. People who needed help and got nothing because you stole from them. I didn't steal it. Ethan's voice rose, desperate and raw. I was holding it. That's what they said, and I believed them. But then, he stopped, swallowed hard. Then they stopped calling, stopped answering my emails. I realized they'd used me, set me up to take the fall, and by then, it was too late. So you hid it here. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't return it without admitting what I'd done. Couldn't turn them in without incriminating myself. I was trapped. And the fire? I didn't start it. Ethan's desperation peaked. I swear to God, I didn't start this fire. Someone else did. Someone who knew about the money. I came here tonight to move it, to figure out how to return it anonymously, but the building was already burning when I arrived. Above them, the ceiling groaned. A massive crack split the air. The structure was failing. Seconds, maybe. Not minutes. We're leaving, Hayes said. Now. And when we get outside, you're turning yourself in. Captain, that's not a request. That's an order. Ethan stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish and terror. Then slowly he nodded. They turned toward the exit, and Ethan ran. Not toward the exit, deeper into the building, into the smoke and flame and chaos. Riker lunged after him, but Hayes held the lead tight. No, not like this. The dog strained against the restraint, whining, every instinct screaming to chase, to catch, to stop the fleeing man. Hayes made a decision. He knelt, unclipped the lead. Go. Bring him back. But don't get hurt. You hear me, boy? Don't get hurt. Riker shot forward like a bullet, and Hayes followed, running into the inferno after his partner and the man who'd betrayed them all. The chase was chaos. Hayes couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The smoke was too thick, the flames too bright, the heat too intense. His lungs burned despite the SCBA. His eyes watered. Every breath was a struggle, but he could hear Riker. The dog's barks echoed through the burning corridors, sharp and clear, cutting through the roar of the fire. Hayes followed the sound, using it as a beacon, trusting his partner to lead him true. The floor beneath his feet was treacherous. Debris scattered everywhere, fallen beams, twisted metal, broken glass. He stumbled twice, caught himself, kept moving. The radio crackled with urgent voices, Marco and Tommy reporting their section clear, Jenna asking for his status, Battalion Chief Rivera ordering all units to evacuate. But Hayes couldn't evacuate, not yet, not without Ethan, not without answers. He burst through a doorway into the main warehouse floor. The space opened up around him, vast and terrible. 3 stories tall, crisscrossed with rusted catwalks and skeletal machinery. Fire danced along the walls, climbed the support columns, dripped from the ceiling in molten ribbons. In the center of it all, Ethan stood frozen, disoriented, panicked, spinning in circles, looking for an exit that didn't exist, trapped by flames on all sides. Riker circled him, barking, trying to herd him back towards safety. But Ethan wasn't listening. He was beyond reason now, lost in terror and guilt and the smoke filling his lungs. Ethan! Hayes' voice barely cut through the noise. We're leaving, now. I can't! Ethan screamed back. Don't you understand? If I go back, I lose everything, my career, my pension, my freedom. My parents will lose their house, everything I've worked for, everything I am, it's all gone. If you stay, you lose your life. Maybe that's better. The words came out broken, desperate. Maybe that's what I deserve. Above them, metal screeched. A catwalk buckled, its supports weakened by heat and flame. It tore free from the wall, swinging out into space, spinning end over end as it fell. Hayes didn't think, didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, hitting Ethan in a tackle that sent them both sprawling across the concrete floor. The catwalk crashed down where Ethan had been standing, a twisted mass of metal and sparks and destruction. If Hayes had been 1 second slower, Ethan would be dead. They lay there for a moment, gasping, the heat pressing down like the hand of an angry god. Then Ethan started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just needed the money. I thought I could fix it, thought I could make it right, but I couldn't. And now people are hurt. The community is hurt, and it's all my fault." Hayes grabbed him by the collar, hauled him to his feet. "You're right. It is your fault. But feeling sorry for yourself won't fix it. Dying in here won't fix it. The only thing that might fix it is facing what you've done, taking responsibility, making it right however you can." "How?" Ethan's eyes were red, streaming tears. "How do I make this right?" "You start by getting out of this building alive. Then you tell the truth, all of it, and you let the chips fall where they may." Ethan stared at him. Then slowly he nodded. Riker barked, urgent and insistent. His nose was working, finding a path through the smoke. The dog took off and Hayes followed, pulling Ethan along, trusting Riker to lead them to safety. They navigated the maze of fire and debris, Riker's instincts guiding them through corridors Hayes didn't remember entering, past obstacles that would have stopped them, toward air that was fractionally clearer, heat that was marginally less intense. The exit appeared like a miracle, a rectangle of purple twilight, cool air rushing in, the sounds of sirens and shouting voices beckoning them forward. They stumbled out into the night, just as the roof collapsed. The warehouse folded in on itself with a sound like the world ending, a thunderous crash that shook the ground, followed by a billowing cloud of embers and ash that rose into the sky like a volcanic eruption. Hayes dropped to his knees, ripping off his mask, sucking in air that tasted like heaven despite the smoke. Beside him, Ethan collapsed, sobbing into his hands, and Riker sat between them, panting, his fur singed and streaked with soot, but his eyes still bright and alert. Alive, all of them alive, against all odds. The aftermath was a blur. Paramedics swarmed. Jenna was there first, checking pupils and pulses, listening to lungs, wrapping blankets around shoulders. Minor burns, smoke inhalation, nothing life-threatening. They'd been lucky, impossibly lucky. Police arrived next, then detectives. Questions began immediately, rapid fire and relentless. Hayes told them everything, about the hidden room, the boxes of money, Ethan's confession, the chase through the burning building. All of it laid bare, no detail spared. Ethan sat on the bumper of an ambulance, staring at nothing, his face blank with shock and resignation. When the detectives approached him, he didn't run, didn't resist. He simply confirmed everything Hayes had said. Then he gave them more. Names: Vincent Ruiz and 2 associates, contractors who'd set up a shell company to skim relief funds, bank account numbers, email addresses, meeting locations, paper trails he'd kept, insurance against the day he knew would come. By midnight, warrants were being issued. By dawn, arrests were being made. The investigation moved with the swift efficiency of a case too obvious to deny, too egregious to ignore. The investigation consumed the next 3 weeks. Detectives traced the money with forensic precision. The shell company, operating out of a rented office downtown, had been siphoning funds from relief initiatives across multiple counties. Not just fire safety programs, disaster relief, food banks, youth sports leagues. Anywhere money flowed toward the vulnerable, they'd found a way to divert it. Millions of dollars. Lives disrupted. Communities betrayed. Ethan Calloway had been one of several low-level participants, recruited with promises of easy money and temporary arrangements. Most had been desperate, drowning in debt, facing medical bills, struggling with situations that made them vulnerable to exploitation. The masterminds, Vincent Ruiz and his partners, had used them all, manipulated them, and when the operation grew too complex, too visible, they'd planned to destroy the evidence and disappear. The fire had been arson, multiple points of origin. Accelerant splashed throughout the building. Ruiz had set it himself, hoping to eliminate the warehouse, the money, and any trace of his involvement in one spectacular blaze. But he hadn't counted on Riker. The dog's nose had detected traces of the accelerant days before the fire. That's what he'd been reacting to at the station. Microscopic particles on Ethan's clothes and boots, transferred from the warehouse during his visits to check on the hidden money. Scent molecules invisible to humans, but glaring as neon signs to a trained search dog. Riker had known something was wrong. He'd been trying to tell Hayes in the only way he could, with his body, his behavior, his unshakable focus on the locker where Ethan had stored contaminated gear. Hayes hadn't understood, not then, but he understood now. The trial moved quickly. With Ethan's testimony, the physical evidence, and the paper trail, the case was airtight. Vincent Ruiz and his 2 associates were convicted of fraud, arson, conspiracy, and attempted murder. 15 years each, federal prison, no possibility of parole. Ethan Calloway received a different fate. His cooperation earned leniency. 18 months in county jail, followed by 5 years of community service and probation. He'd lost his badge, lost his career. His parents' house was saved, but barely. His reputation was destroyed, but he was alive, and he'd told the truth, for whatever that was worth. The money, every last dollar, was recovered and returned to the City Relief Fund initiative. Within a month, the programs resumed. Fire safety classes started up again at the elementary school, with Marco volunteering as the primary instructor. Youth outreach expanded at the community center, now including hands-on training in emergency response. Emergency supply distribution reached families who'd been waiting nearly a year for help. The community breathed again, slowly, carefully, but with hope renewed. Station 19 received a commendation from the city, a plaque, a ceremony. Press coverage that made Hayes deeply uncomfortable. He stood on the steps of City Hall, the mayor's hand on his shoulder, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions he answered with short, professional responses that gave away nothing of how he really felt, which was tired and sad and angry that it had come to this. But there was one moment that made it worthwhile. After the ceremony, back at the firehouse, Hayes found a letter waiting on his desk. Hand-delivered, no postage. His name written in careful cursive on the envelope. Inside, a single page, written by Maria Santos, the single mother who worked 2 jobs, whose daughter had been enrolled in the fire safety classes before they were shut down. The letter was simple, direct, the kind of honesty that came from people who didn't have time for pretense. Captain Hayes, thank you, not just for finding the money, for not giving up. My daughter finished the fire safety class last week. She knows how to check the smoke detectors now. She knows how to get out if there's a fire. She knows how to call 911. That might not seem like much to you, but to me it's everything. Because last month, there was a small fire in our apartment. A candle I forgot to blow out before I went to work. My daughter was home from school, sick with a cold. She smelled smoke. She remembered what she learned. She got herself and her little brother out of the apartment. She called 911. She saved their lives. If you hadn't fought to bring those classes back, she wouldn't have known what to do. And I might have come home to something I can't even think about. So, thank you for doing your job, even when it was hard, for caring about people you've never met, for not letting the bad guys win. You gave us hope when we didn't have any. You gave us a chance, and that matters more than you'll ever know. Maria Santos. Hayes read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his locker, right next to his badge and his family photos. Some days the job felt impossible, the fires too hot, the corruption too deep, the problems too big to solve. But then there were letters like this, reminders that even small victories mattered, that saving one life was worth all the effort, that hope, once lost, could be found again, if you were willing to look for it. That evening, Hayes took Riker for a walk, just the 2 of them, no destination in mind, moving through the neighborhood as the sun set and the streetlights flickered on. They passed the elementary school, where kids were playing on the playground, their laughter echoing in the cooling air, past the community center, where teenagers were gathering for the youth outreach program, carrying backpacks and sporting equipment, past Mrs. Chen's bodega, where the old woman waved at them through the window, a smile on her weathered face. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted, a shadow dispelled. Hayes looked down at Riker. The dog trotted beside him, tongue lolling, ears up, completely at ease now that the mystery was solved and the danger was past. You know what you did, don't you? Hayes said quietly. Riker glanced up, his eyes bright with intelligence and something that looked almost like understanding. You didn't just find money, boy. You found justice. You found hope. You reminded everyone, including me, that the truth matters, that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Riker's tail wagged. You're a good dog, Riker. The best partner I've ever had. They walked in comfortable silence, past houses with lights glowing in windows, past families gathering for dinner, past the ordinary, beautiful rhythms of life in a community that had been hurt but was healing. When they returned to the firehouse, the crew was gathered in the common room. Tommy had made dinner, spaghetti this time, which was infinitely better than his chili. Marco and Jenna were arguing about football, their voices rising in mock indignation over some referee call or player trade. Hayes stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, taking it in. The warmth, the camaraderie, the sense of family that came from shared danger and shared purpose. This was why he did the job. Not for the commendations or the headlines, but for this. For the people who had your back, for the community you served, for the knowledge that you were part of something bigger than yourself. "Hey, Cap," Marco called. "You eating or what? Tommy actually made something edible for once." "Barely," Jenna muttered. Tommy's laugh boomed through the room. Hayes smiled. "Yeah, I'm eating." He grabbed a plate, filled it with pasta, and sat down with his crew. Riker curled up at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed in contentment. And for the first time in months, everything felt right. The seasons changed. Summer gave way to fall, fall to winter. The city moved through its cycles, storms and sunshine, cold nights and crisp mornings, the endless march of time that waited for no one. Station 19 continued its work. Fires were fought, lives were saved. The rhythm of the job continued, unbroken and unbreakable. But something had shifted, something fundamental and permanent. The crew was different now, more vigilant, more aware. They checked their equipment with extra care, asked more questions, paid closer attention to the small details that might reveal larger truths. They'd learned that corruption could come from anywhere, that trust had to be earned and maintained, that even people you thought you knew could surprise you, for better or worse. And Riker kept working, kept training, kept doing what he was born to do. He found a lost hiker in the woods north of the city, following a scent trail through 6 miles of dense forest. He located a missing child who'd wandered away from a park, tracking her through a suburban neighborhood in under an hour. He discovered a gas leak in an apartment building before anyone was hurt, his nose detecting the chemical signature that human instruments had missed. 8 lives saved in his career now, 8 people who were alive because of him. Because of his training, his instincts, his unwavering commitment to finding what was lost and protecting what was vulnerable. But he'd done more than save lives. He'd saved something intangible, something harder to measure but equally important. He'd saved trust. He'd saved integrity. He'd saved the belief that justice was possible, that truth mattered, that good could still triumph over greed. One cold evening in December, Hayes sat on the back steps of the firehouse, a mug of coffee warming his hands. Above him, stars filled the sky, sharp and bright in the clear air. Riker sat beside him, leaning against his leg, warm and solid. "You ever wonder if we make a difference?" Hayes asked softly. Riker's ear twitched. "I mean, we put out fires. We save people, but then we go home and the world keeps turning. The problems keep coming. The bad guys keep finding new ways to cheat the system." Riker shifted, pressing closer. Hayes scratched behind the dog's ears. "But I guess that's not the point, is it? The point is, we keep trying, keep fighting, keep standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible." He took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "You taught me that, boy. You and your stubborn refusal to let things go. Your absolute certainty that the truth was worth finding, even when no one else was looking for it." Riker's tail thumped against the concrete. "We can't fix everything, can't save everyone, can't solve all the world's problems, but we can fix what's in front of us, save who we can reach, solve the problems we're given." He looked up at the stars, vast and eternal and indifferent. "And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Our small part, our piece of the puzzle. Trusting that if enough people do their part, the whole picture comes together." Riker made a soft sound, somewhere between a whine and a sigh. Hayes smiled. "Yeah, I agree." They sat in comfortable silence, man and dog, partners and friends, watching the stars wheel overhead and listening to the sounds of the city settling into night. Inside the firehouse, voices rose in laughter. Someone turned on music. The smell of popcorn drifted out through the open door. Life continued. Imperfect and messy and beautiful. And in that moment, Hayes felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the absence of problems, but the acceptance that problems would always exist and the determination to face them anyway, with courage, with integrity, with partners who had your back and communities worth protecting, and with a dog who saw the world not as it was, but as it should be. A dog who understood, instinctively and completely, that loyalty and love were stronger than greed, that truth was worth pursuing, that justice was worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible, even when the fire was still burning, especially then, because that's when heroes matter most, not when everything is easy, but when everything is hard, when the world seems ready to collapse and hope seems lost and the darkness feels overwhelming. That's when someone has to stand up. Someone has to answer the call. Someone has to say no to corruption and yes to courage. Sometimes that someone wears a badge. Sometimes they carry a hose. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs and see through a lens humans can barely comprehend. But they all share something essential. Something that can't be taught or bought or faked. The willingness to do what's right. Not for recognition, not for reward, but because it's right. Because someone has to. Because if not them, then who? Hayes stood, stretching muscles stiff from the cold. "Come on, boy, let's get inside." Riker rose, shaking himself, ready for whatever came next. Ready to rest or work, to sleep or search, to be a companion or a hero. Whatever was needed. Because that's what he was, that's what they both were. Guardians, protectors, seekers of truth in a world that sometimes seemed determined to hide it. They walked inside together, into the warmth and light and fellowship of Station 19. The door closed behind them, and outside the city slept, safe for another night, protected by people who cared, by systems that worked when people made them work, by the simple, powerful truth that courage existed, that honor mattered, that good could still win, one fire at a time, one life at a time, one truth at a time, until the work was done, or until the next call came, whichever came first. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they don't carry badges or stand in spotlights or receive recognition for what they do. Sometimes they walk beside us on 4 legs, their eyes clear, their hearts pure, their purpose unwavering. They don't ask for applause, they don't seek fame, they simply do what needs to be done because that's who they are. And in doing so, they remind us of who we're supposed to be. Honest, brave, loyal, willing to stand up when it would be easier to look away. Because the world needs people like that, now more than ever. People who refuse to accept corruption as inevitable, who won't let injustice go unchallenged, who believe against all evidence to the contrary that truth still matters. We need them in firehouses and hospitals, in classrooms and courtrooms, in neighborhoods and communities across the world. We need them to answer the call. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they come with 4 legs, a wagging tail and a nose that can find what we've lost. Not just money or evidence or missing persons, but hope itself. The belief that tomorrow can be better than today, that justice is possible, that doing the right thing even when it's hard is always worth it. That's the real treasure Riker uncovered. Not the money hidden in a warehouse, but the truth hidden in all our hearts, that we're capable of more than we know, that we're stronger together than apart, that love and loyalty and courage are the most powerful forces in the universe, and that sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person or one dog refusing to give up, refusing to look away, refusing to let the darkness win, because that's what heroes do. They answer the call, every time, no matter what.